Hello. Europe thought the Mongols were a myth, but in 1241, the steppe thunder reached its heart, and by sunset, an entire army had vanished. The wind came first, cold, sharp, and endless, sweeping over the Carpathians, carrying with it the stench of ash and iron. Then came the riders. They appeared at dawn, their silhouettes etched against a red sky, a tide of horsemen moving as one living creature. No banners fluttered, no trumpets sounded, only the steady drumbeat of hooves and the glint of curved steel. The Mongol Horde had entered Europe. In the Polish town of Krakow, word spread like wildfire. Villages burned overnight. Entire garrisons vanished into the mist. Refugees staggered westward, whispering the same phrase over and over. They come like smoke. At the castle of Legnica, Duke Henry the Pious gathered his council. Knights of Poland, Templars from Bohemia, German lords in shining mail. Candles flickered over their armor as they argued. "They are beasts," growled Sir Ulrich von Tannenberg. "No discipline, no faith. 1,000 lances will scatter them." Bishop Otto shook his head. "You do not scatter a storm, my son. You endure it." Henry's gaze was fixed on the map before him, a web of rivers and roads marked with red ink. "They've already crossed the Oder," he said quietly, "and the King of Hungary is besieged in the south. We stand alone." A silence fell. Beyond the walls, church bells tolled in warning. From the watchtowers came the faint sound, a low, growing thunder. The horizon darkened with movement. The Mongols came in waves, fast, silent, disciplined beyond comprehension. Scouts rode far ahead, lighting fires that vanished before pursuit. Messengers never returned. It was as though the steppe itself had swallowed them. Among the Mongol vanguard rode a general known as Baidar, grandson of Genghis Khan. His eyes were narrow and unreadable as he surveyed the fertile plains of Silesia. "The West smells of arrogance," he said in his native tongue. "Let them come. Pride is soft." As night fell, flames dotted the Polish countryside. Monasteries burned. Crosses glowed red in the inferno. In the great hall of Legnica, Duke Henry rose and drew his sword. "Then we meet them at dawn," he said, "for Christ and for Europe." Outside, the wind carried the faint cry of a Mongol horn, long, low, and haunting. It did not sound like a call to battle. It sounded like the end of the world. The bells of Legnica rang for 3 days and nights. Their iron throats called every able man to arms, knights, monks, and peasants alike. From the hills of Bohemia and the plains of Silesia they came, answering the Duke's summons. Banners painted with lions, eagles, and crosses swaying in the wind. The courtyard before the city gates filled with shining armor and clumsy zeal. Priests blessed swords with trembling hands, sprinkling holy water that steamed upon hot steel. Duke Henry the Pious rode among them, his blue cloak snapping in the spring wind. His face was young but lined by sleepless nights. "We fight not for land," he called, "but for every church and child the East would burn." The army roared in reply, the sound echoing off the castle walls. Around him stood the flower of Christendom, the Teutonic knights in black cloaks marked with white crosses, the Templars bearing their red sigils, the nobles of Poland glittering in plate and pride. In all, nearly 10,000 men, heavy cavalry, pikemen, and crossbowmen, the strongest army Europe could muster this side of the Rhine. Yet amid the prayers and bravado, whispers ran like shadows. A German knight muttered to his comrade, "They say these Mongols ride without rest, that they drink horse blood and vanish into the wind." "Fairy tales," the other replied, though his voice trembled. "Steel and faith have never failed us, but not all were blind." Father Lucas, the old abbot of Tyniec, watched the preparations in silence. "They fight ghosts," he murmured, "ghosts who have already measured their graves." Far from the Christian host, across the forests and rivers, Baidar's scouts watched unseen. They moved like wolves, no armor, no light, no mercy. Each dawn, their arrows struck from the mist, killing messengers, spreading terror, and vanishing before the alarm. In his camp, Baidar knelt before a small fire, drawing symbols in the dirt. Around him stood his captains, subutized veterans, silent and scarred. "They gather as sheep before slaughter," he said. "We will give them the illusion of victory, then take it away." He rose, looking west toward the faint glow of Legnica's towers. "Let the priests bless their swords. The gods of the steppe are already waiting." That night, the wind shifted, carrying smoke and the faint clang of distant bells. And though the knights slept beneath their crosses, the Mongol eyes watched from the dark, counting every heartbeat until the storm began. The first sign was smoke, thin black columns rising over distant hills, quiet, deliberate, as if drawn with a brush across the pale April sky. Then came the silence. Villages vanished overnight. Scouts sent eastward never returned. The forests, once full of birds and the hum of spring, grew still. Only the wind moved, and sometimes, faintly, the echo of hooves. Duke Henry's army marched east, banners high, armor gleaming, the pride of Christendom in full parade. But every mile brought unease. They found burned churches, slaughtered livestock, no enemy to face. Only corpses left as messages. Soldiers stripped, bound, their throats cut, their helmets placed neatly beside them like offerings. "Devils," muttered a knight, crossing himself. "They fight without honor." Peter of Opala, a grizzled captain, spat into the mud. "They fight to win." Far ahead, unseen, the Mongols watched from the treeline. Baidar and his lieutenants moved their forces like smoke, dividing, circling, striking at night. They attacked the baggage trains, then vanished before the knights could give chase. Every skirmish ended the same. The enemy fled, leaving a handful of bodies and false trails. By the fourth day, morale cracked. Some knights demanded a full charge eastward to crush the elusive foe. Henry hesitated. His counselors urged caution. "They are leading us," said Father Lucas. "Can you not feel it? The hand that beckons us forward also digs our graves." But pride won. "Better to die with sword in hand than wait for ghosts," growled Ulrich von Tannenberg. They advanced again, deeper into Silesia through fog and forest. Behind them, smoke rose from their own supply lines. Baidar's trap was closing. He had split his force into 3 wings, encircling the European host from all sides. Scouts relayed signals with mirrors and burning arrows. That evening, as the knights made camp near the town of Legnica, the wind shifted eastward. Faint horns sounded. Not battle horns, but calls, eerie and inhuman, drifting through the mist. "Are they mocking us?" one squire whispered. From the shadows, a Mongol rider appeared, alone, holding a severed head high above his saddle. He hurled it toward the Christian lines and galloped away into the fog. The knights roared in outrage, but Henry only watched, his face pale beneath his helm. "They are not mocking us," he said quietly. "They are measuring our fear." And beyond the fog, the horde waited, thousands of eyes, cold and patient as winter, ready to swallow Europe whole. Dawn broke gray and heavy over the plains of Legnica. A thin mist coiled across the fields, swallowing banners and men alike. The air smelled of wet grass and fear. Somewhere in the distance, a single Mongol horn sounded, long, low, and hollow. Duke Henry rode to the front, visor raised. Around him, the allied host of Europe glittered in the pale light. Knights in polished mail, their horses restless beneath the weight of steel. Banners of Poland, Bohemia, and the Teutonic Order rippling faintly in the wind. "Forward," he commanded. "Let the pagans face the wrath of Christendom." The army surged ahead, heavy, glorious, unstoppable. At first, they found only scattered riders, small bands of Mongols who loosed a few arrows and fled into the fog. The knights shouted with triumph, spurring their mounts onward. The chase began. The Mongols retreated deliberately, their movements choreographed with cruel precision. Smoke pots ignited behind them, thick and black, choking the air. From afar, it seemed the enemy was in full flight. "Press them," cried Ulrich von Tannenberg. "They run like rats." Henry hesitated. Something in the stillness felt wrong, the silence between the hooves, the lack of arrows striking back. "Hold the center," he called, but his words vanished into the chaos. His cavalry was already gone, swallowed by fog and fury. From the ridges to the east, Bidar watched the trap spring shut. He raised his arm, and 100 horns answered. The mist erupted with motion. Mongol wings sweeping in from both flanks, their arrows darkening the air. The knights were caught mid-gallop, blind and unprepared. Arrows punched through visors, into throats and joints, finding every weakness. Horses screamed, rearing as their riders fell. The Polish infantry, lagging behind, saw only shapes, the silhouettes of friends collapsing, banners falling into the smoke. Then came the drums, deep, relentless, pounding like the heart of the steppe. The Mongol center turned and charged back into the disoriented cavalry. Curved sabers flashed, and the plain dissolved into slaughter. Henry fought to rally his men, his sword red to the hilt. "Hold the line, for the cross," he shouted. But the line no longer existed, only pockets of doomed valor surrounded by the swirling tide. Through the fog, a black standard appeared, Bidar's. The Mongols tightened the circle. Trumpets of bone blared in triumph. Father Lucas fell to his knees, clutching his crucifix as arrows hissed around him. "Lord, if this is your will," he whispered, "then Europe must learn to fear." And as the sun finally broke through the mist, the truth became clear. Legnica Pole was not a battlefield. It was a grave. The smoke had turned gold under the midday sun, but it was not light. It was fire. The plains of Legnica Pole burned with steel and screams. What had begun as a proud charge of Europe's finest now lay in ruin. Everywhere, the banner of the cross fell into mud. The Teutonic knights, encircled and blinded by smoke, fought like lions, but the Mongols were ghosts, striking from every side, vanishing before a sword could turn. Duke Henry rode at the center, his blue surcoat torn, his voice hoarse. "Hold!" he cried again and again. "Christ is with us." But even faith drowned in chaos. Arrows fell in black sheets. A knight beside him convulsed as one pierced through the slit of his visor. Another fell backward, his throat a fountain of red. From the hill above, Bidar watched impassively. He had ordered the horns to sound different tones, one for each maneuver. His riders obeyed without hesitation, moving like a single vast organism. To them, this was not rage. It was craft. He turned to his lieutenant, Cadden. "Break them by breath," he said. "Let the wind do the killing." At his signal, the rear ranks of Mongols dismounted, lighting bundles of dried reeds soaked in oil. The smoke thickened again, choking, blinding. In the shifting haze, Christian lines collapsed. Commanders shouted orders that no one could hear. When the wind cleared for a moment, Henry saw the truth. His army was gone. The Polish banners lay trampled. The Templars fought on foot, their shields splintered, surrounded by mounted archers who circled like vultures. Henry spurred forward, gathering what men he could, 50 knights, perhaps fewer. "With me!" he roared. "For Flanders, for Christ." They charged one last time. The Mongol ranks parted, a feigned retreat. Then they closed in from both flanks, cutting down men and horses alike. Henry's sword sang once, twice, then snapped. A Mongol arrow struck his horse. The beast stumbled, throwing him to the ground. Before he could rise, a rider dismounted and drew a curved blade. Henry looked up at him. A young Mongol, face calm, eyes empty of hatred. Their gazes met for a heartbeat. Then the sword fell. When it was over, Bidar rode to the fallen duke. He dismounted, regarded the severed head with mild curiosity, and spoke quietly. "A brave man, but bravery is not strategy." He ordered it lifted on a spear and carried before the retreating Mongol host, not in mockery, but as a message. By nightfall, the field was silent. Ravens circled overhead. Europe's strongest army had ceased to exist. The knights of Christendom had met the science of empire, and the age of the cross had cracked before the steppe's wind. The day after Legnica poll, the wind carried only ashes. The plains where banners once shone were now black and silent, littered with armor that glimmered faintly under the sun like bones of some ancient beast. The Mongol horde did not rest. They did not bury. They moved. Badar's riders swept westward in perfect rhythm. Columns of horsemen, archers, engineers, and herders driving flocks behind them. Every village, every abbey, every tower that marked the land of Christendom burned before dusk. At Sroda, the monks fled with relics in their arms. One turned to raise the cross against the riders. An arrow silenced him mid-prayer. At Glago, townsfolk barricaded the gates. Mongol engineers arrived at sunrise. Within hours, firestones shattered the walls. No screams followed, only the hiss of flames. To the terrified survivors, the horde seemed endless. They rode without rest, their horses changing every few miles, their camps vanishing before pursuit could even begin. Wherever they passed, smoke rose like pillars, a black crown on the horizon. In Breslau, news reached the bishop before dawn. Legnica has fallen. The duke is dead. The east is burning. Panic spread like plague. Bells rang not for mass, but for flight. Nobles fled to castles. Merchants hid gold in wells. Peasants vanished into the forests. The few who stayed prayed aloud, asking why God had abandoned his knights. But God did not answer. Far to the east, Bidar and Khadan sat by a dying fire. The general traced a map in the dirt with his dagger. "The road to the Oder is open," he said. "Poland will crumble like dry wood." Khadan nodded, his expression unreadable. And then, Badar's eyes lifted toward the fading stars. "Then the empire will know we reached its gates." A messenger approached, young, mud-streaked, bowing deeply. "Word from Subutai," he said. "The Hungarians have fallen. Batu rides for the Danube." For a long moment, Bidar said nothing. Then he smiled, faint, cold, inevitable. "So Europe burns from both ends." That night, the Mongols camped outside Breslau, their fires circling the city like a crown of thorns. Inside, the church bells tolled without rhythm, the sound of faith trembling before the wind. The chronicles would later call it the year when the world ended. For wherever the Mongols rode, even the shadows fled. Breslau stood like an island in a sea of ash. Its walls were high, its towers proud, the last bastion between the Mongols and the heart of Europe. But courage is fragile when the wind smells of burning flesh. The bells rang day and night. Refugees crowded the streets. Mothers clutching children, knights without horses, monks clutching relics and prayers. Every rooftop was covered in watchmen scanning the horizon. They saw no enemy, only the endless smoke. Then, one morning, the mist lifted, and death appeared. The Mongol host surrounded the city in a crescent of fire. Drums rolled from the plains, deep and steady, a heartbeat that shook the stones. Their banners were black, painted with red wolves. At their head rode Bidar, calm as a priest before an altar. He raised one hand. The drums stopped. Silence. Then he gave a single order. Catapults rumbled forward. Machines of wood and rope dragged by oxen. Within minutes, the first stones flew, arching over the walls and crashing into the city square. The people screamed, but worse followed. The Mongols loaded their engines with bodies. Rotting corpses from Legnica pole, flung high through the air, bursting upon impact. Pestilence became their weapon. The air turned foul. Priests ran through the streets with incense and holy water, but faith could not purify the plague. Inside the cathedral, Bishop Otto prayed aloud, his voice breaking. "Lord, spare us. Turn the wind." But the wind obeyed Bidar, not God, carried smoke and sickness straight into the city. On the third day, panic erupted. Some knights begged to charge out and die fighting. Others barred the gates. One young Templar broke ranks, shouting, "If the Lord wills our deaths, let them see our steel." He led 50 men through the gate and vanished into the smoke. No scream, no clash, no sound returned. From the towers, the defenders watched as Badar's riders gathered the bodies of the fallen and stacked them in neat lines before the walls. a message of silence. At dusk, the Mongols withdrew just out of bow range and sat their horses motionless, staring. No siege, no assault, just the weight of terror pressing from beyond the walls. By nightfall, Breslau burned from within. Fire started by its own desperate citizens, trying to cleanse what could not be cleansed. From the plain, Baidar watched the flames rise and whispered to Khadan, "They destroy themselves faster than we ever could." The next morning, the gates stood open. No one remained to fight, and when the horde rode through the smoldering ruins, the blackened cross above the cathedral cracked and fell into dust and silence. They left Breslau behind them, a charred wound on the land. Not a church bell rang, not a voice rose in prayer. Only the sound of hooves and wind filled the air as the Mongol columns moved westward. Villages emptied before they arrived. Entire towns fled into forests, leaving food and gold on the roads in hopeless tribute. The Mongols did not slow. They rode through abandoned streets like phantoms, their armor smeared with ash, their banners limp with dew. Europe had never known such silence. In the German borderlands, panic had replaced reason. Knights refused to ride, priests burned their own relics, and kings barricaded themselves in fortresses. From Prague to Nuremberg, one rumor followed another. The horsemen of hell are coming. In truth, the horde was smaller now. Baidar's riders had thinned, not from defeat, but from distance. His scouts rode days ahead, charting rivers and roads for a greater invasion to come. Yet the terror they left behind was more powerful than their arrows. At a monastery near Gorlitz, an old abbot recorded in his trembling hand, "They do not speak, they do not sleep. Their horses breathe smoke, and the ground dies beneath their hooves." By April's end, Baidar reached the westernmost edge of Silesia. The odor shimmered before him, wide, silver, and still. Beyond it lay the German states, rich and proud, unaware that their hour had already struck. Khadan rode beside him, eyes narrow beneath his fur cap. "Shall we cross, my lord?" Baidar studied the water. "Not yet. The West must hear our silence first." They made camp among the ruins of a monastery, feeding their horses on the grain of a noble's burned estate. That night, a strange calm settled. The men sat without laughter, sharpening their blades, watching sparks rise into a blood-red sky. Just before dawn, a rider approached, breathless, his horse collapsing beneath him. He fell to his knees before Baidar, dust clinging to his face. "From Karakoram," he gasped. "The great Khan is dead." The camp froze, even the horses stilled. Baidar's expression did not change, but his voice grew soft. "Then the Empire calls us home." Khadan lowered his head. "Europe lives by a heartbeat's chance." The next morning, the horns sounded not for war, but withdrawal. The horde turned east, their silhouettes vanishing into the morning haze as silently as they had come. When the people of the West finally emerged from their hiding places, they found only hoofprints, ashes, and fear. Europe had survived not by strength but by coincidence. And for generations to come, when the wind howled over the plains, the peasants whispered a single prayer: "Lord, keep the horsemen from the east asleep." Spring turned to summer, and still the smoke hung over Europe, thin, ghostly, unwilling to fade. The Mongols were gone, yet their shadow remained. Burned fields, ruined churches, and a silence that even birds seemed afraid to break. From Krakow to Prague, bells tolled not in triumph but in mourning. Every sermon began with the same question whispered by trembling lips: "If God is with us, why did he ride with them?" In Legnica, what was once a battlefield had become a plain of bones. The peasants who dared return found armor half sunk in the mud, swords tangled in weeds, and skulls still wearing crowns of rusted iron. They buried what they could, but there were too many. A priest carved into a wooden cross. Here fell Christendom's pride and its blindness. Duke Henry's widow, Anna of Bohemia, arrived months later. She dismounted alone, wrapped in black, and knelt among the graves. Around her, the wind whispered through the grass like the breath of ghosts. "You died for Europe, she said softly. And Europe learned nothing. In the courts of the West, kings met in fear. Messengers told of whole armies vanishing, of cities burning before a single battle. Some spoke of demons, others of a new Rome rising from the east. The Pope called for a crusade of repentance, not against pagans, but against the sins of pride. Few answered. The survivors of the Legnica host wandered like relics. One Templar, his face scarred by fire, reached Paris months later. Before the royal court, he removed his burned gauntlet and laid a Mongol arrow upon the marble floor. "We fought the wind," he said. "It cannot be slain." At monasteries, scribes began to rewrite the chronicles of the world. They inked the names Batu and Subutai beside Caesar and Alexander. The age of knights, they realized, had ended in the mud of Cilicia. And yet, amid the despair, a strange humility took root. Cathedrals rose again, not higher, but humbler. Frescoes showed not kings, but saints walking barefoot across the earth. Europe had survived, but it no longer believed itself invincible. When autumn came, the farmers plowed again, turning black soil over pale bones. The harvest was meager, but they worked in silence, as if each furrow was a prayer. And when the wind from the east blew across the fields, mothers told their children to listen. To the hooves they could not hear, the lesson they must never forget. "Fear not the barbarians," they said, "but the day we grow blind enough to become them." 40 years passed. Empires shifted like dunes, kings died, and new wars were born. But the memory of the great eastern storm still haunted Europe. The name Mongol was spoken only in whispers, as if the mere sound might summon the wind again. One autumn evening, when the air smelled of rain and earth, a lone rider appeared upon the plains of Cilicia. His horse was small and scarred, his armor dull with years. Around his neck hung a charm of bone, worn smooth by time. His name was Arghun, once a warrior under Baidar Khan. He dismounted at the edge of Legnica Pole, where the grass had grown high over forgotten graves. The battlefield was quiet now. No banners, no bones, only the soft rustle of reeds. Yet the earth still held memory. Each step of his boots sank slightly deeper, as if the ground itself recognized the weight of what had been. Arghun knelt and ran his fingers through the soil. Beneath the grass, he found a fragment of rusted mail and a broken silver cross. He turned it in his hand, studying its simple lines. "We buried them all," he murmured, "but not their faith." He looked up, to the west, where the sun bled across the clouds, and for a moment, he remembered the sky of his homeland. Endless, wind-scoured, without boundaries. Here, the horizon felt smaller, enclosed, but strangely peaceful. In the distance, he saw a monastery. New stone walls built atop old ruins. Bells rang faintly. The monks inside had no idea that the man watching them had once ridden with the storm that shattered their world. Arghun removed his helmet, revealing a face lined with both war and wonder. "We rode to conquer," he said softly, "and found nothing the wind could keep." He placed the cross upright in the ground, pressing the soil around it, then stood for a long while as the sky darkened. The bells tolled again. Their sound drifted across the plain, not in fear this time, but in remembrance. When night fell, the rider turned eastward, toward the endless steppe. The moon rose, silver and silent, and his shadow stretched far across the field where Europe had once died and been reborn. And if one listened closely, through the rustle of the grass, one might hear the whisper, not of war, but of peace found at last. The wind passes, the cross remains. Bye.